training camp tour continues with Matthew Stafford and the Rams looking for a big bounce-back season after a heck of a Super Bowl hangover. The Rams were putrid last year, going 5-12, the most losses by a defending Super Bowl champion all time. One reason LA's star players missed a bevy of games because of injury. Matthew Stafford, Cooper Kupp, and Aaron Donald missed a combined 22 games. A new season upon us, and the Rams are looking to get right. And let's get right to the site. Welcome in CBS Sports lead NFL insider Jonathan Jones, who joins us from Rams training camp in Irvine, California. And Jonathan, the big question here is, can the Rams bounce back in 2023? Can they be relevant again, as you set the scene for us there in Irvine, California?
I think they can be. Now, look, I don't think that there's any real legitimate Super Bowl aspirations for anyone who does not actually don a Rams jersey. Look, we were out here about this time last year, and yeah, there were the expectations about potentially repeating. But I think the Rams knew that it was going to be really, really hard to get back on top of the mountain. And so now, in what was a controlled crash landing last season, right? I mean, the end of the year did not go the way that they had hoped for, but they decided to sort of expedite. I don't want to call it a tank, and I don't really know what you would call it. It was almost like a half season. Let's get into a protected barrel roll, and let's take on all the dead cap that we have to in 2023. And sure, we're going to have to send some pieces away. And in fact, if we want to find a free agent out there, it's going to be someone on a one-year deal for the vet minimum. That's okay, they believe, because they still have very important pieces in very important places. They have the quarterback, they have the wide receiver in Cooper Kupp, they have the all-world interior defensive lineman in Aaron Donald. And so when you have those pieces, those blue chippers at blue chip positions, they do feel that they can be competitive. This may be a team that has to be led by the offense. I don't know that if they get into a shootout with another team that they're going to be able to ultimately win. They're going to need a young defense to step up. But out here, first day with fans here at training camp, vibes are pretty high.
You spoke with head coach Sean McVay, one of the smartest minds in all of football. There were retirement rumors in the offseason. What is his mindset going into this season, and what were your takeaways from your conversation with him?
Well, yes. Look, it was a very trying season last year. He was very open and honest, certainly as the season went on and then at the end of the year about how difficult it was for him. But interestingly enough, he really took a lot of the blame early on in our conversation where he said, look, I had to be a better coach for my coaches and for my players. And that is what he's done over the past couple of months, looking internally on how he can be a better Sean McVay, how he can be a better head coach for this entire staff and for this group. And look, it's going to take one of his best coaching jobs, I believe, this upcoming season. 57 of the 90 players on this current roster are either rookies or second-year players in the NFL. It may very well be the youngest roster in the NFL, not just this year, but in many, many years once we get to roster cutdowns in about a month from now. And so he knows that he's going to have to coach up the young guys, but he talked to me, he's very excited. He wants that challenge. And so that's what we gleaned from our conversation with Sean McVay. Of course, the pads aren't on out here. There's a lot of competition at a whole lot of spots. This is not the Rams from a couple years ago where you go through and say, all right, you might have a competition at right guard, but otherwise everything's kind of locked up. No, almost every position on the defense, I'd say maybe 9 out of 11, perhaps 8 out of 11, they're all up for grabs. The wide receiver spots after Cooper Kupp and Van Jefferson, they are up for grabs. The offensive line, left tackle and center, those positions are up for grabs with so many guys, but most of them all very young.
Sean McVay said the Rams were approached by other teams about trading Matthew Stafford in the offseason, but the club was in unanimous agreement to keep him. You also spoke with Matthew Stafford. He's coming off an injury, a spinal cord contusion, and he missed a lot of games last season. What is he saying about his health going into this season, his 15th in the NFL?
Yeah, I actually asked him. He's the oldest player on this team at 35 years old. And there's actually only 3 30-year-olds on this team, on this very young team. So in talking with him, he said, look, I asked him, there's a training camp cliche of you're in the best shape of your life, right? This is the best you've ever felt. And he said, well, I'm not going to go that far. I've probably had some sprier years, he said, but feels good, certainly coming back. Remember last year he dealt with the elbow at the start of training camp and really through the start of the season. And, of course, you mentioned the injury that he suffered there at the end of last year. So he feels good. right now he's very excited about this season. Yeah, there was some potential trade talk, which, you know, look, just because a team picks up the phone doesn't mean that any sort of trade was ever going to transpire. Was there a restructuring conversation? That depends on what the definition of is, having talked with some sources over here. And so, look, the point of this is Matthew Stafford is here. He's a starting quarterback. He's still under the exact same contract, and the Rams are very, very happy that he's going to be leading them this season.
Well, Vegas is not expecting a lot from the Rams this season. Win total set at 6.5, Jonathan. How does this team stack up in the NFC West?
Well, I guess I understand why it's 6.5, right? We talked about the young guys on this team. And so if you're looking at it and you're saying, okay, best case scenario, everyone stays healthy, the young guys play really, really well in their year one or year two, and things break your way, is this an 8-win team, a 9-win team? We're talking best case scenario right there. So I do understand why the odds are where they are. That said, look, if San Francisco gets great quarterback play out of Brock Purdy again, competent quarterback play there, then, yeah, you have to believe that they are going to be the division winners. Can Seattle, who seemed to maybe have lightning in a bottle last season, is that going to continue? Or do you believe necessarily in Geno Smith? The one thing that these Rams do have going for them is that they're in the NFC. So even if you don't win the division, if you get those 8 or 9 wins with the 3 wild cards, you may very well get into the dance. And if you're there, does your championship DNA sort of take over? I think that that's maybe best case scenario right now for the Rams as we stand here very early on in training camp. Make sure these young guys come along, baptism under fire, sure, and make sure that your blue chip players play as such.
49ers are the favorites to win the NFC West for the 2nd year in a row. Jonathan Jones camping out with the Rams here on CBS Sports HQ. Jonathan, thank you. And our NFL training tour continues on Friday with the Dallas Cowboys. Jonathan Jones and his crew driving 100 miles north to Cowboys camp in Oxnard, California. And our training camp tour rolls on next week with the Jaguars and Bills here on HQ.